Hey guys, this is going to be my latest review of Perry Mason from HBO, and this is episode 5, chapter 5. So, just over halfway through this first season. I say first season because it's just been announced this past week that there will indeed be a second season of Perry Mason. Which originally wasn't the plan, or if it was, they didn't let on it was the plan, because this originally was announced as a limited season, but I guess they were just playing it cautious to see how it was received, and it's been getting a fair bit of buzz and quite a bit of attention. So obviously it's done quite well, and they've decided there's enough there for a season 2. So full spoilers for this episode, and I mostly enjoyed this one. It's sort of interesting how things escalate quite quickly, or quicker than I expected, because my prediction in the last episode, when you had the John Lithgow character, EB his name is, I've been calling him Oliver for some reason, I'm not quite sure why that is, but when EB committed suicide last week, or the episode before this, I basically predicted then that's obviously going to be the route to Perry Mason becoming the lawyer. Then we know he is, this being his origin story. So it became quite clear that's the route they were going, and in the long run Perry Mason would take over from EB, basically his mentor, but that it's happening a lot faster than you would expect, because in this episode Mason and Della, who are both devastated obviously by his passing, by his suicide, both really close, especially Mason, but they're frantically looking around for another lawyer. And we get this storyline where you have this like district attorney or court appointed lawyer Frank, who the actor, I think it's Matt Mallory or something like that, but I've seen him in lots of stuff. He's one of these like really good character actors, but he's been appointed by the court, so there's a suspicion of bias. But yeah, he gets appointed to take over Emily's case, and we see Perry Mason and Della both trying to talk to Emily, and also to Sister Alice in the church, because they're never far away. In fact, Alice finally gets her bail in this, and it comes from the church and from Sister Alice, and it's another kind of controversial scene for them, because Alice basically persuades them to use funds from the church, or funds that have been donated to the church, to bail Emily out, which they reluctantly agree to do. But so she bails Alice out, or Emily out, sorry. Alice is the one doing the bailing. But you have this conversation between Mason and Della and Sister Alice and also Emily, where they're trying to persuade Emily then it would be in their best interest not to let like this other lawyer represent them, to sort of keep them as her like legal team, because Della, this is actually a really good episode for Della. I really like her character in this. She's very sort of proactive. She's very sympathetic as well. I think she comes across as very sincere when she's talking to Emily. And at one point, she really gives this sort of big pep speech where she is keeping her abreast of the case and abreast of the fact that they do have potential leads that could point out then George didn't kill himself and that there is suspicious circumstances going on. But yeah, the big plot of this episode is then you get this court appointed lawyer Frank who has sort of underhanded motives, and and I think one of the highlights of the episode is when Della, because they obviously have to turn all the files over to Frank, but they don't trust him. That they sort of cotton on that then he's up to something shady. So what happens is Della basically manages to sneak some files out from the office without Frank knowing. So she takes them back to her partner's house because obviously they would never think about looking for them there really, or so that's a bit of leverage they've got because they can look through these files and still have information on the case. So Della's really great in this episode because we really see what a strong kind of female character she is. Because in the first half of the episode, she's really supportive of Mason. They've had their odds definitely during the series up to this point, but she's very supportive and she's kind of the strong one. We again see this depiction of Mason as this down and out kind of broken character. He's obviously taking it hard. The passing of Oliver, or I called him Oliver again, but EB, this like father figure for him, but Della's kind of the strong one, and she encourages Mason to go and see his kid. Of course, he's got like this exchange relationship with not only his ex-wife or ex-partner, but also with his child because he hasn't been there for him, and that they happen because they go to the funeral for EB and they stop off on his family, and there's this link between. I think you could say this is a certain amount of cliche that they get into, but it works well enough thematically where you have EB's son being really critical of his father, and that's hard for Mason to hear. Not just because he obviously respects EB so much, but because it does strike a chord with him about his own relationship with his son, or lack of, let's say. So that there is something quite eerie about how that mirrors itself with the two guys. So there is something scary about how Mason is following in EB's footsteps in more than one way, including having this very isolated lifestyle where he is cut off from his own family almost by choice. But anyway, this does inspire Mason to go and visit his son, who's obviously very young, and I think when he gets there, like, the mother isn't there. There's like his ex-partner, that is, like her mother or something's there, or someone else anyway who's looking after the boy, and she's actually a bit more sympathetic and lets him in at least for a bit to see the son and stuff. And but it's kind of awkward, like things get a bit tense when Mason's ex-wife comes back, and she certainly tries at first to be like sociable, and she lets him see him and stuff, but she makes it clear then this is sort of not on if you think you're going to come back into our lives when it suits you. Gives him a bit of a talking to, basically. But yeah, it's a good character beat, I think, for Della in this episode. Just how proactive she is, how efficient she is, how sympathetic she is to the men in her life in a way. Obviously E.B. originally and now Mason. But yeah, what this all builds to is Mason. They decide he's the best man for the job by the end of the episode, so it actually escalates really fast. And I'm not sure if this is kind of exaggerated, because it does seem awfully quick. He decides he's going to take the bar test because obviously he needs to qualify. He apparently has been like an intern or something, and certainly has an interest in the law, even though he's a private detective. But Della has said, we think you're the best man for the job. And she approaches Emily with this and kind of gives her that talk. And there's actually a pretty funny scene when Mason storms into Frank, his name is, like the lawyer, his office, and he just goes off on him, and it's one of these like entertaining noir hammy type scenes where he just unloads on him, but you do sort of believe it coming from this character. It's really funny, like he's throwing books at him and just chews him out, and it's so aggressive then he just scares the shit out of Frank, and it's his way of getting him out the office so that he can stop looking at the files. But yeah, also be just to literally make a statement like, get out, get away from this case. We don't want you on this case. So next thing you know, Mason decides to take the bar exam because they do talk Emily into sacking Frank and letting Mason represent her. So this feels like a bit of a fudge because, of course, they would need to have Mason in place really quickly because obviously the case is about to go to trial, to go to court. I mean, maybe this is possible. Maybe is this, possible to take the bar exam this quickly. I don't know. Obviously, I think we're led to believe that Mason has been doing research previously and stuff, and does up to a point know his stuff, even though he's never been a lawyer before. But what happens is they fast track him because you have this character who gives him free legal advice, and of course in this show, in this world, there's going to be like an ulterior type motive, and this guy's ulterior motive is then he wants the job, basically the job of the district attorneys. So he actually has a motivation for working against him and giving Mason this free legal advice. So, as I said, things really escalate fast because, yeah, by the end of the episode, Mason takes the bar exam, he passes, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Perry Mason is the new lawyer representing Emily on this case. So, I think one thing I'll say about this series is it's sort of funny how, up to now at least, Mason has been overshadowed by a lot of the other characters. You have Sister Alice. As I've said, personally, I do like Della a lot, and there's been various other, obviously, Lithgow's lawyer. Now, obviously, I like Matthew Rhys a lot. I think it's really good casting. He's a good fit for the character, and the characters had his moments, but I do actually feel then a lot of times he's been overshadowed in his own show, and he hasn't been the most compelling character. Um, I think there's certainly been cliches with the character and certain moments where he hasn't been that exciting as a character compared to some other characters, but that that looks as though it may well change now that we've gotten to the stage where he's going to be representing Emily and all this stuff. So, switching to Sister Alice and her stuff, obviously, there's this ongoing promise that she's made to resurrect Charlie, and she refuses to go back on it, and there's this constant power struggle with her and the church. And I guess like the big sort of set piece with her in this episode is to convince Emily then she can actually like live up to her promise. She once again stages like this very melodramatic, very sort of theatrical stunt, and it's that she has this guy in a wheelchair who she brings up on stage, and basically he's faking it. He's pretending to be in a wheelchair. He's pretending to have like whatever, a broken leg, or that he can't walk. And so the whole act is that she heals his leg, and this is right in front of Emily, who eats it up like a lapdog. And that's it, really. Emily believes that, oh my god, Sister Alice can really do this. She can like resurrect Charlie. And we get further stuff with the media and protesters. You get a group strongly opposing Alice. You get another group really supporting her, fanatically supporting her. So we get continued stuff like this. There's probably not too much of interest with Alice in this episode, but there's that, of course. We see further kind of media presence around what's happening with her and the case. I think probably another smaller complaint with the episode is that we kind of get the race stuff again sort of worked in, because there's this scene where Drake essentially goes on a holiday with his wife and his family, and they go to this beach, and they're kicked off the beach basically. Well, there's a bunch of like African Americans on the beach, and it's obviously in a different state, and the police just told, now they lie about it. They're not upfront about this because they say we're closing the beach, and Drake confronts the officer about it, and he says, well, I'm in the police force, I'm one of you. And that's when they kind of don't hide it any more than they're being racist, because he or they sort of do, but the officer says, well, what state? And he tells him and says, well, basically this is a different state. Your kind, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but your kind aren't welcome on the beach in this state. So it's getting more into the racism, kind of having this segregation on the beach where it's being closed up because they don't want black people on the beach. But we've had sort of that theme bubbling along, and we've seen that Drake's wife kind of wants to keep things on the back burner. She's sort of encouraged him not to get political, not to push the whole African American rights, not to try and make an enemy of the police force, basically. Whereas you've had, because I think it's this episode where they go to like a discussion and a protest type thing, and you have them talking to like another couple, and I think the way it works out is that his wife, Drake's wife, is making the case for, yeah, it's actually best not to rock the boat. It's safer that way. It's more convenient. But then you have the opposite wife, I think it is, actually making the opposite case, saying, no, we have to stand up. We have to fight for our rights. That basic thing. But yeah, I do think, although I like Drake as a character, I liked what they were doing with him originally and his like involvement in the case. But I do think then sometimes the themes are a little crowbarred into the show. I think sometimes then they almost need to give proper attention to these themes, or they need to just leave it out altogether. I think it's one or the other. I think sometimes they feel a little heavy-handed, but obviously we'll see what happens with Drake and his character. The other only little thing is that Mason does see a connection with the corrupt cop or detective, whichever, I suppose cop, the one who of course shot and killed the crooks who were involved in the kidnapping and the whole ransom thing. He actually sees him at this church gathering, or part of this religious group. So he has like, I think it's a daughter who's like performing there. And Mason, it's right across the street from the incident, like the murders of these crooks, and it's Mason tracks him down and sort of sits next to him and makes it clear, I'm basically on to you. This is all kind of suspicious. Because again, there's a tie into the church and this place. So yeah, Mason getting closer to the truth when it comes to this guy and his involvement in what's been going on. So there you have it. That's episode 5 of Perry Mason. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've watched this episode, if you've been watching below. And I have another one to catch up with actually, so you can expect my review of episode 6 soon. But thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more new TV reviews soon. See you guys later.